Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Um, Today we're going to be looking at how hormonal shifts can impact women on the autism spectrum. And we've got a whole bunch of articles. A lot of them are actually from this organization called CHEAP ABA, which I thought was really interesting. And they focus on making therapy more accessible. And it kind of got me thinking, are these hormonal impacts we're going to be talking about so significant that they're leading to people needing therapy? Like, is there a connection there? So that's what we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? We always say that autism can affect anyone, but we're only really starting to understand how much hormones can really affect autistic women. And it's like this whole other layer of complexity that they have to navigate.
Definitely like a whole other layer on top of everything else. So let's peel back that layer. A lot of these articles are talking about puberty being a really difficult time for autistic women. What's going on there?
We'll just imagine you're going through puberty and you've got all these hormonal changes happening, but at the same time, you're also dealing with sensory sensitivities and maybe some social and emotional challenges that can come with autism. So for a lot of autistic women, it can be way harder than it is for their neurotypical peers.
Yeah, so it's like everything's already so intense during puberty,
Yeah.
and then you add in the sensory overload and the social situations. It's going to be completely overwhelming.
Exactly. And then think about periods. A lot of women experience like anxiety or depression or fatigue when they have their period. And so if you're already dealing with autistic traits, those normal hormonal fluctuations can have a really big impact on your well-being.
Oh, for sure. So we could be talking worse PMS, harder to manage mood swings,
Yeah.
maybe even sensory sensitivity is getting totally out of whack. And it's all just because of those normal hormonal changes everyone goes through.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's also the huge hormonal shifts that happen during pregnancy and postpartum. For some autistic women, this can mean a lot more stress and anxiety, and even changes in behavior. So it's a time when extra support could be really, really important.
Yeah, and that's where I was thinking that connection to cheap ADA might come in.
Hmm.
If these hormonal changes are causing so many issues, it makes sense that access to affordable therapy could be super important.
Right. And just in case anyone isn't familiar with ABA, it stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. And it's basically a type of therapy that helps people with autism develop new skills and manage maybe some of those more challenging behaviors.
Gotcha. So it's not just about knowing these hormonal impacts exist,
Hmm.
but also making sure that people have the support they need when they need it. But besides therapy, is there anything that women can do to kind of get ahead of these changes? Anything proactive they can do?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes hormone therapy is an option, but you'd really want to talk to a doctor about that. Aside from medication, self-care is really, really important. So things like exercise or relaxation techniques, even just eating healthy, all of those can really help minimize how much those hormonal changes affect you. And then, of course, having a good support system is huge.
When you say support system, do you mean connecting with other autistic women who just get it?
Yeah.
Because I imagine that shared experience can be so validating.
Exactly. Being able to share your experiences and get advice from other women going through the same thing, that can be so valuable. And seeking out professional support from therapists or counselors who understand autism and how hormones can play a role, that can make a world of difference, especially when it comes to navigating those tougher emotional challenges.
It really does feel like we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much to consider when it comes to how autism and female hormones are connected. But even what we've talked about today shows that it's a conversation we need to be having a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. And it brings up a big question, like if these normal hormone changes can make autistic traits more challenging, shouldn't there be more awareness and support out there specifically for autistic women at every stage of their lives?
That's a really great point.
It makes you wonder how many women are struggling out there without the right support or even without understanding what they're going through.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in these articles is how much they stress that autism really affects everyone differently.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not like there's one set
Yes,
experience.
absolutely.
So some women might go through massive changes in their symptoms because of hormones, while others might not even notice a difference.
Right.
And the types of challenges they face could be completely different.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just acknowledge that hormones can have an impact. We also have to understand that that impact is going to look different for everyone.
You-
And that's where those open conversations and support systems are so important. Creating spaces where women can share their experiences without judgment and get help that's actually tailored to what they need.
Exactly.
And, you mentioned cheap ABA earlier, and their focus on affordable therapy really got me thinking. Because getting the right support can be so expensive. especially if your symptoms are constantly changing because of hormones.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So having access to affordable quality healthcare is important for everyone. But it can be even more challenging for people with autism who might need specialized therapies or support services. So organizations like Cheap ABA are really trying to address that and make things more accessible.
That's so important. It really highlights, how important it is to make sure those resources are out there
Yeah.
and that people can actually access them, no matter what their, financial situation is.
It's about accessibility and awareness. And it kind of brings us back to that point about needing to understand how autism shows up differently in women, especially when you add in the whole hormone piece of it.
Exactly. And this actually connects to something we see with diagnosis. It's not always straightforward.
Oh, because those presentations can be more subtle.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Historically, a lot of the research on autism and even the ways we diagnose it were based on what we saw in boys. And this can create bias when we're trying to spot autism in women because their experience is just different. It doesn't fit into that neat little box.
No, a woman could be dealing with, real struggles related to autism. But because her symptoms don't match that typical picture we have, she might not get diagnosed, or she might not get the right kind of help.
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens more than we'd like. That's why it's so important to raise awareness among doctors and healthcare providers. We need to give them the knowledge and the tools to recognize the many different ways that autism can look in women, taking into account things like hormonal influences and all those other factors that make each person unique.
Yeah, and thinking about that potential for being overlooked or misdiagnosed, I can't even imagine the emotional toll that must take.
Yeah.
Feeling like something's wrong, but not having the words or understanding to make sense of it.
Yeah, it can be incredibly isolating and lead to a lot of self-doubt and anxiety, even depression. That's why a timely and accurate diagnosis is so important. It can really empower someone to understand their own experience and get the right support and speak up for what they need.
And I feel like part of speaking up is challenging those stereotypes we have about autism. We need to move past this idea that there's one autistic type and embrace the fact that people's brains just work differently. That's what neurodiversity is all about.
Absolutely. Recognizing and respecting the individual needs and experiences of autistic women, that's key to creating a society that's truly inclusive and supportive.
This deep dive has really shown how important it is to have that personalized approach when we're trying to understand and support autistic women, not just assuming everyone's the same.
Absolutely. It's not just about managing symptoms. It's about empowering autistic women to live full and happy lives. And that means making sure they have access to the right information and resources, and those support networks to help them tackle the challenges they face, including those tied to the hormonal changes we've been talking about.
It feels like we've uncovered so much about how autism and hormonal changes work together in women, but it's really just the beginning.
And that's the exciting part, There's always more to discover and more to understand, and that means more ways we can help improve the lives of others. One thing that's really stuck with me through all of this is, despite all the progress we've made in understanding autism, there's still so much that we're just starting to figure out.
It's like we're peeling back layers of an onion, and there's always another layer underneath. It really does feel like that intersection of autism and hormonal changes. It's one of those areas where we're just starting to scratch the surface.
Oh, definitely. And it makes you think about all the potential implications, especially when it comes to things like diagnosis and support.
For sure. Like if healthcare providers aren't aware of how differently autism can present in women, and especially with those hormonal influences, it seems like there's a real chance that some women are being missed.
Yeah, that's a huge concern. And it's something that we see happening all the time. If a woman's symptoms don't fit that stereotypical picture of autism, she might not get the diagnosis or support she needs.
Right. And it must be so frustrating to feel like something's just not right.
Yeah.
But you don't have the words or the understanding to really explain it.
It can be very isolating and lead to self-doubt and a lot of anxiety.
For sure.
That's why getting a diagnosis early on and an accurate diagnosis is so important. It can really help women understand their own experiences and get the support that's right for them and advocate for their needs.
Yeah, and I feel like part of that advocating for their needs is also about challenging those stereotypes, those misconceptions that people have about autism. We need to move away from this idea that there's just one autistic type and recognize that there's a whole spectrum of human experience out there.
Absolutely. Recognizing and respecting the individual needs and experiences of autistic women, that's really crucial for creating a society that's inclusive and supportive.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It really highlights how we need a more personalized approach to understanding and supporting autistic women, not just assuming that everyone's the same.
Exactly. And it leaves us with a lot to think about. If something as normal and natural as hormonal fluctuations can have such a big impact on the lives of autistic women, what can we do to make sure that they have the resources and the support and the understanding they need to not just cope, but to thrive?
That's such a powerful question. And it feels like a real call to action for all of us, to learn more, challenge your own assumptions,
Yeah.
and work towards a world that really embraces neurodiversity in all its forms. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation, and we hope it sparks some curiosity for you and a desire to learn even more